see that God is actually the devil.
Alright, let's hear it. By the way, since it's English, well, on the list of my ability, we'll go to explain this. So, take it away, Morg.
The devil accepts a burnt virgin sacrifice. Here the devil has all the firstborn children of Egypt killed, including the animals. This verse describes how the devil loves the smell of burning flesh of a sacrificed lamb. Here the devil orders the death of men, women, children, infants, and animals. Here the devil commands one of his servants to kill his only son as a sacrifice.
You continue to make a rant. Let me point this out. If you're an atheist, what's your moral standard to say that God is allegedly evil? Even though in your own belief, if he is an atheist, how come that you are arguing, or how come that you're complaining against someone from the begin with, you don't believe he exists? Come on. Well, let's explain this. First, he quoted Judges chapter 11 from verses 30 to 40. And his argument, you see, God commanded Jephthah to sacrifice her daughter. Wait a minute. Was it literal sacrifice? Well, not so much, my friend. Why? First and foremost, you must have to know the context of this. Point 1. You see, Jephthah was aware of the law against human sacrifice. Take note, they're Hebrews. I hope you know that, if you really read the entire context of these passages. So, if he had intended to offer a human sacrifice, he would have known this would have been a blatant rejection of God's law. Second, the text doesn't actually say he killed his daughter in a sacrificial offering. It doesn't. This is simply inferred by some from the fact that he promised that whatever came out of his house first shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering, according to Judges 11:31. As Paul indicated, human beings are to be offered to God as a living sacrifice, according to Romans 12:1. Not as dead ones. Jephthah could have offered his daughter to the Lord as a living sacrifice. For the remainder of her life, she would serve the Lord in the temple and remain a virgin. So, it's not about the daughter being killed as some sort of a sacrifice. Third, a living sacrifice of perpetual virginity was a tremendous sacrifice in the Jewish context on that day. So again, that's not prescriptive, it is a descriptive. Come on. As a perpetual virgin dedicated to the service of the Lord, the daughter of Jephthah would not be able to bring up children to continue her father's lineage. Jephthah acted as a man of honor and great faith in the Lord by not going back on the vow that he had made to the Lord his God. Fourth, this view is supported by the fact that when Jephthah's daughter went out to weep for 2 months, she did not go out to mourn her impending death. Rather, in verse 38, I already quoted that, Mr. Morg. She went out and bewailed her virginity, not her death. Finally, if she was facing death at the end of the 2-month period, it would have been very simple for her to marry some young man and live with him for the 2 months prior to her death. But there was no reason for Jephthah's daughter to mourn her virginity unless she was facing a life of perpetual virginity. So, come on, Morg. You have read the entire context, I hope. But if not, then why would I believe that? Well, in Exodus chapter 11 and 12, how could an all-loving God slay the firstborn of all the Egyptians? Well, it's wrong first and foremost. It's wrong to assume that because the Egyptian people may not have had control over Pharaoh's decisions, that they were completely innocent. Every individual Egyptian certainly had the opportunity throughout the long ordeal of God's judgment upon Egypt to flee to Moses and the Hebrews for protection from these judgments. In fact, Exodus 12 verse 38 states that the mixed multitude went up with them, the children of Israel also. So no doubt, there were many Egyptians who joined the Hebrews as a result of God's judgment. Second, well, is it wrong? Is it also wrong to assume that simply because the Egyptian people did not change Pharaoh's mind, that they could not have changed his mind. Although the power of the people is severely limited under a dictatorship as that of Egypt, well, it's conceivable that the people could have revolted so as to either force Pharaoh to change his mind or to overthrow him. In fact, Exodus 12:33 says, "And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste." Up until this point, the Egyptian people had apparently not made any effort to urge the Hebrews to leave the land. So, the Egyptians were obviously content to leave such matters in the hands of their king. And by doing so, they were not innocent of the decisions which were made by their king. God's judgment was not directed only at Pharaoh or the heads of the state of the land, but on Egypt as a whole. And since they were equally responsible for the oppression and bondage of the people of God. But if atheism is true, again, Mr. Morg, what's your moral standard again? Then how about 1 Samuel 15:2-3? Why did God destroy the Amalekites? We already repeatedly answered this kind of claim. Repeatedly. By the way, FYI, the Amalekites were far from innocent. They were utterly depraved. If you really read Genesis 12, come on. If you really read other passages like Exodus, you'll find out that these people were against Israel. They even want to annihilate Israel again. You know what? They were utterly depraved. What's more, they desired to destroy Israel, God's chosen people, the channel of his redemptive plans for all humankind. So the act of their total destruction was necessitated by the gravity of their sin. Otherwise, some hardcore remnant might rise to resume their hateful act toward God's people and plan. So, wait, how about those innocent children? First, in the Bible, we are all born in sin and deserve death. Everyone will eventually be taken by God in death. And by the way, if God is the author of life, he can take it again. And by the way, he can resurrect it. Second, God is sovereign over life and reserves the right to take it when he will. Lastly, all children who died before the age of accountability are saved. So, another one, if atheistic worldview is true, what's your moral standard again, Mr. Morg? How about Exodus chapter 1, which is not even prescribed to Christians? It was prescribed to the nation Israel at the time of Moses. That's not prescriptive, that's descriptive. I mean descriptive. And why did God tell Abraham to sacrifice his son when God condemned human sacrifice? You see, God is not interested, nor did he plan that Abraham should actually kill his son. The fact that the angel of the Lord prevented Abraham from killing Isaac, if you read Genesis 22 verse 12, demonstrates this. What is the purpose of God? His purpose was to test Abraham's faith by asking him to completely surrender his only son to God. The angel of the Lord declared that it was Abraham's willingness to surrender his son, not the actual killing of him, that satisfied God's expectations for Abraham. Actually, in Genesis 22 verse 12, God said to Abraham, "Do not stretch out your hand against the lad, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." So again, Isaac was not killed. Isaac was not being sacrificed. Also, Abraham so trusted in God's love and power that he willingly obeyed because he believed God would raise Isaac from the dead. And by the way, let me point this out. It is not morally wrong for God to order the sacrifice of our sons. He offered his own son, Jesus Christ, on Calvary. Indeed, even our government sometimes call upon us to sacrifice our sons for our country. But if atheistic worldview is true, then what is your moral standard? again.
Or if you think that that's evil and satanic, then you're right. But that wasn't the devil. That was all actually God.
What a fun argument from Morg. But what is his moral standard to say that God is evil? That God is allegedly the devil? Come on. You've quoted many passages from the Bible, but you are not even reading it in context. And now our atheist friends will go on to say, you see, God is mega. What do you mean by that? Cosmic dictator? But what's your moral standard to say that? So to my atheist friends who are watching to us right now, if you're gonna go to quote those passages, you must have to make sure that you know the context of these passages. Don't tell us that you are allegedly former Christian who knows the Bible more than us, but you even don't know the historical data of it. Context, please. Okay?